What happens when the bonds of family are stretched to the breaking point? The Miller household seems normal, but beneath the surface lies a tangle of unspoken resentments and dangerous secrets. When Andrew disappears, the desperate search unravels the carefully constructed lives of his parents, David and Catherine, and exposes a shocking connection to a figure from their past. This is a story about love, loss, and the devastating consequences of lies. Can this family find redemption in the face of unimaginable tragedy, or will the shadows of the past consume them entirely? You won't believe how far they'll go to protect their secrets. Watch now and tell us what you think in the comments. And please, hit that subscribe button. The silence in the Miller house was a living thing, a heavy blanket smothering the usual evening bustle. It had started subtly enough, a gradual fading of the familiar sounds of their lives. The muted thump of the television downstairs, the clatter of silverware against dinner plates, the distant, tinny echo of music leaking from Andrew's room, all had dissolved into an unnerving quietude. Catherine Miller stood frozen by the kitchen sink, her hands still slick with soapy water. The last dish slipped from her grasp, shattering against the tile floor, the sound sharp and violent in the stillness. It was a sound that finally broke her trance, replacing the growing unease with a jolt of pure, cold fear. "Andrew?" Her voice, when it came, was thin and reedy, barely a whisper above the hum of the refrigerator. She wiped her hands on her jeans, a frantic, useless gesture, and moved into the hallway. "Andrew, dinner's ready." The house remained stubbornly silent. David Miller, loosening his tie in the living room, felt the shift too. The absence of Andrew's usual sullen presence, the lack of his slammed doors and muttered complaints was a hollow ache in the domestic symphony. He frowned, a prickle of irritation quickly morphing into something darker as Catherine's mounting panic began to infect him. "He's probably just holed up in his room," David said, his voice trying for reassurance he didn't quite feel. Teenagers, always with the drama. But his feet carried him upstairs anyway, a knot tightening in his stomach with each step. He pushed open Andrew's door, the hinges groaning in protest, and the room yawned back at him, empty and still. The computer screen glowed with the cold light of an unfinished game. A half-eaten bag of chips lay overturned on the desk, crumbs scattered across discarded textbooks. It was a scene of teenage chaos, of life abruptly paused, and it was profoundly, terrifyingly wrong. "Andrew!" Catherine's voice, sharper now, cracked with rising hysteria. She appeared in the doorway behind David, her eyes wide and darting around the room as if she expected her son to materialize from the shadows. The first hour was a blur of frantic activity, of desperate searching that yielded nothing but mounting dread. They tore through the house, calling Andrew's name until their voices were raw, their hope fraying at the edges. They checked the backyard, the garage, the tool shed, clinging to the pathetic hope that he'd simply wandered off and lost track of time. Chloe, Andrew's 12-year-old sister, watched the unfolding panic with a quiet intensity that belied her age. Her usually bright eyes were clouded with confusion and a growing fear that mirrored her parents'. She trailed after her parents, a silent shadow, absorbing the frantic energy, the unspoken terror that hung heavy in the air. When the first hour bled into the second, and Andrew remained missing, the reality of the situation began to sink in with brutal force. This wasn't teenage rebellion. This wasn't a tantrum or a disappearing act for attention. This was something else, something colder and far more sinister. David, his face pale and drawn, made the call. The words caught in his throat, thick with a fear he'd never known. "My son. He's gone. We can't find him." And in that moment, the silence in the Miller house became a scream. The flashing lights of the patrol cars painted the Millers' manicured lawn in stark blues and reds, turning the familiar scene into something alien and nightmarish. Neighbors, drawn by the commotion, huddled on the periphery, their faces a mixture of concern and morbid curiosity. The air thrummed with the low murmur of voices, the crackle of police radios, and the barely suppressed sobs of Catherine Miller. Detective Sarah Chen arrived on the scene with a practiced calm that belied the knot of empathy tightening in her chest. She was a woman in her late 30s with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing and a demeanor that projected both authority and a quiet weariness. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her tailored suit was impeccable, a uniform that spoke of years spent navigating the often brutal world of police work. As she stepped out of her unmarked car, the chaos of the scene resolved itself into a grim order. Uniformed officers cordoned off the area. Paramedics attended to Catherine, whose fragile composure threatened to shatter completely, and David stood rigidly by the front door, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. Sergeant Miller, a young officer with a nervous energy, approached Detective Chen. "Detective, Mr. and Mrs. Miller reported their 16-year-old son, Andrew, missing about an hour ago. No signs of forced entry, no witnesses. The kid just vanished." Chen surveyed the scene, her gaze lingering on the concerned faces of the neighbors. "Any history of runaways? Family disputes?" "The parents say no," Miller replied. "A few typical teenage arguments, but nothing serious. He's not the type to just take off." Chen nodded, her eyes already taking in the details. The expensive house, the well-tended garden, the air of affluent normalcy that now felt grotesquely violated. This wasn't just another missing persons case. She could feel it in the undercurrents of fear and confusion radiating from the scene. She approached David Miller, her voice low and steady. "Mr. Miller, I'm Detective Chen. I'm going to need you to walk me through everything, from the beginning." David's account was fragmented, punctuated by long silences and the tremors that occasionally shook his frame. He described the ordinary evening, the growing unease, the frantic search, the chilling discovery of Andrew's empty room. With each word, the weight of his fear seemed to solidify, pressing down on them all. Chen listened patiently, her gaze unwavering, her questions precise and probing. She noted the details. Andrew's solitary habits, his online gaming, the subtle tension between family members that David couldn't quite conceal. As David spoke, Catherine's sobs escalated, a raw, keening sound that cut through the sterile language of the investigation. Chen watched her, a flicker of something akin to recognition in her eyes. She had seen this kind of grief before, the primal scream of a parent facing the unthinkable. It was a sound that never failed to reach her. Later, as the forensics team began their meticulous work inside the house, Chen found herself drawn to Chloe. The young girl stood apart from the chaos, her small frame rigid, her gaze fixed on the front door as if she expected Andrew to walk through it at any moment. Chen knelt beside her, her voice gentle. "Chloe, can you tell me anything about what happened tonight? Did you see Andrew before he disappeared?" Chloe hesitated, her lower lip trembling slightly. He was angry," she whispered. "He and Dad were fighting. About his grades, I think." "And then?" Chen prompted. "Then Andrew went upstairs, and I didn't see him again." Chen's mind raced, piecing together the fragments. A family argument, a missing teenager, a house steeped in an unsettling silence. It was a familiar pattern, and yet something felt off. A dissonance, a subtle discord in the seemingly ordinary tragedy. As the night deepened, casting long shadows across the lawn, Detective Chen knew one thing for certain. This was more than just a simple disappearance. This was a story buried beneath layers of secrets, and she was determined to unearth every single one. The morning after Andrew's disappearance dawned with a deceptive normalcy. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the Millers' silent house. Birds chirped outside, oblivious to the turmoil within. But the illusion of peace was fragile. A thin veneer stretched over a gaping wound. Detective Chen returned to the house early, her mind already racing with questions. She found David and Catherine huddled in the kitchen, their faces etched with exhaustion and a raw grief that seemed to thicken the air. They moved like ghosts in their own home, their interactions stiff and formal, the easy intimacy of family life replaced by a strained politeness. "Any news?" David asked, his voice hoarse. Chen shook her head. "No, Mr. Miller. We've issued a missing persons alert and we're following up on every lead. But I need to understand your family better. To find Andrew, I need to know who he is, who you all are." She started with Andrew. His grades had been slipping. Chloe had mentioned an argument. Was there tension at home? David sighed, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. Andrew's been difficult lately. Moody, defiant, typical teenage stuff, we thought. But yes, we've had our disagreements. I push him on his studies. He's a bright kid, but he's been slacking off. Catherine remained silent, her gaze fixed on her hands, twisting a tissue into a tight knot. Chen turned to her, her voice gentle. "Mrs. Miller, what about Andrew's social life? Friends? Girlfriends?" Catherine finally looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "He has friends, mostly online. He spends hours on those video games. I don't really know them. He's always been a bit of a loner." Chloe entered the kitchen, her presence almost unnoticed by her parents, who seemed lost in their own private hells. Chen beckoned her closer. "Chloe, you seem very observant. Has Andrew been acting differently lately? Anything out of the ordinary?" Chloe hesitated, her gaze darting between her parents. "He's been getting calls," she whispered. "Secret calls. He'd go outside to talk and he'd sound angry sometimes." Secret calls. That was new. Chen's interest sharpened. "Did you ever hear who he was talking to?" Chloe shook her head. "No, he'd always go where we couldn't hear him." Chen made a note, the pieces of the puzzle slowly beginning to arrange themselves in her mind. A troubled teenager, family tension, secret calls. It was a volatile mix. As Chen continued her questioning, she sensed a subtle but persistent undercurrent of unease. David and Catherine seemed to be holding back, their answers carefully measured, their eyes avoiding each other. There were silences that stretched too long, glances exchanged that spoke volumes. Later, while the forensics team processed Andrew's room, Chen found herself drawn to David's study. It was a masculine space, filled with leather-bound books and expensive artifacts, a shrine to success and order. But even here, in this bastion of control, Chen sensed a disturbance. A photograph on David's desk caught her eye. David and another man, younger, their arms slung around each other, laughing. The other man was vaguely familiar. "Who's this?" Chen asked, turning as David entered the room. David stiffened, his eyes flicking to the photograph. "An old friend," he said quickly, "from college. We've lost touch." But there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or regret, that belied his casual tone. Chen filed it away, another loose thread in the unraveling tapestry of the Miller family. As the day wore on, the sense of unease deepened. The house, once a symbol of their lives, now felt like a stage for a tragedy, each room holding a secret, each shadow whispering a lie. And Detective Chen knew, with a growing certainty, that finding Andrew meant more than just finding a missing boy. It meant uncovering the truth hidden beneath the surface of the Miller family. Detective Chen returned to Andrew's room, the sterile white of the forensic lights casting an eerie glow on the scene. The remnants of a teenage life lay scattered, discarded clothes, posters peeling from the walls, a chaotic jumble of books and electronics. It was a space that spoke of rebellion and isolation, a stark contrast to the ordered elegance of the rest of the Miller house. The forensics team worked with methodical precision, dusting for fingerprints, collecting hair samples, meticulously cataloging every item. Chen, however, was drawn to the more intimate details, the fragments of Andrew's inner world that might offer a glimpse into his state of mind. She started with his desk. Amidst the scattered textbooks and gaming equipment, she found a small, worn notebook tucked away in a drawer. Its pages were filled with scribbled notes, fragmented thoughts, and dark, brooding sketches. "They're disturbing," Officer Perez said, handing Chen a sketch of a distorted face, its eyes wide with terror, its mouth twisted into a silent scream. Chen felt a chill run down her spine. The notebook wasn't just teenage angst. It was a window into a troubled soul. There were cryptic phrases like, "They don't understand," and "trapped in this gilded cage," hinting at a deep-seated resentment and a sense of alienation. As the forensics team continued their work, Chen turned her attention to Andrew's computer. It was password-protected, but with the help of a tech specialist, they were able to bypass the security. What they found was a digital diary, a chaotic stream of consciousness poured out onto the screen. "His social media," the specialist murmured, scrolling through Andrew's accounts. "It's intense." Chen leaned closer, her eyes scanning the screen. There were private messages filled with angry outbursts, online arguments that escalated into vicious cyberbullying, and a series of increasingly desperate pleas for help on anonymous forums. He was isolated, Chen observed, noting the lack of genuine connection in his online interactions. He was reaching out, but in all the wrong ways. One exchange in particular caught her attention. It was a series of messages with an unknown user, their identity hidden behind an anonymous avatar. The tone was volatile, shifting from playful banter to heated arguments in a matter of minutes. "Who is this?" Chen wondered aloud, her fingers tracing the words on the screen. "This could be crucial." The specialist shook his head. "The account's been deleted. No way to trace it now." Frustration tightened Chen's jaw. It was like chasing shadows, grasping at fragments of a puzzle that refused to come together. But she pressed on, determined to piece together Andrew's digital footprint. They found a hidden folder containing audio recordings. In them, Andrew's voice, raw with emotion, poured out his fears and frustrations. He spoke of feeling trapped, of being suffocated by his parents' expectations, of a secret he was desperate to keep hidden. "They'll kill me if they find out," he whispered in one recording, his voice trembling with fear. "I don't know what to do." Chen's heart pounded. Kill him? Who is they? The recordings painted a picture of a teenager on the edge, teetering between despair and defiance. He was a boy caught in a web of his own making, his cries for help lost in the noise of the digital world. As the day wore on, the weight of the evidence in Andrew's room grew heavier. The disturbing sketches, the volatile online exchanges, the desperate audio recordings. They were all pieces of a puzzle, and each piece hinted at a darker truth than anyone had imagined. Chen knew with a chilling certainty that finding Andrew meant delving into the darkest corners of his life, confronting the secrets he so desperately tried to hide. And she was prepared to follow that path no matter how treacherous it might be. The investigation into Andrew's disappearance widened, casting a net over his school, his circle of friends, or lack thereof, and anyone who might have crossed his path. Detective Chen found herself navigating the labyrinthine corridors of Northwood High, the air thick with the scent of teenage angst and whispered rumors. Andrew's teachers described him as bright but withdrawn, a student who excelled academically but struggled to connect with his peers. He was always on the periphery, Miss Evans, his English teacher, said, her brow furrowed with concern. Like he was watching a movie of his own life, not actually living it. His classmates offered a more fragmented picture. Some spoke of his intelligence with a hint of resentment, others of his aloofness with a touch of fear. He was weird, one boy muttered, avoiding eye contact. Kept to himself, played those creepy games. Chen interviewed a few of Andrew's online gaming acquaintances, their faces flickering with the cold light of computer screens. Their accounts were contradictory, ranging from indifference to outright hostility. There were whispers of online conflicts, of rivalries and betrayals in the virtual world that seemed to bleed into the real one. He pissed a lot of people off, one gamer admitted, his voice distorted by a voice changer. He was good, but he was a dick about it. Suspicion initially fell on a group of students known for their bullying behavior. There had been reports of online clashes with Andrew, of cruel taunts and threats exchanged in the anonymity of the Internet. But their alibis checked out, and their denials, though laced with bravado, seemed genuine. Chen felt a growing unease. The easy answers weren't there. The obvious suspects didn't quite fit. It was as if the case was deliberately obscuring itself, leading her down blind alleys and dead ends. Even the evidence from Andrew's room felt contradictory. The dark sketches hinted at a troubled mind, but the audio recordings also revealed a vulnerability, a desperate longing for connection. He was both a victim and, at times, his own antagonist. Back at the station, reviewing the case files, Chen found herself drawn back to the dynamics within the Miller family. The strained silences between David and Catherine, Chloe's watchful eyes, the undercurrent of secrets that seemed to permeate their interactions. "They're hiding something," Chen murmured, tapping her pen against the file. "I can feel it." She revisited Chloe's statement, her words echoing in Chen's mind. He was angry. He and Dad were fighting. The argument about grades, the secret calls, the photograph in David's study. The pieces were there, but they didn't form a clear picture. Chen felt like she was standing on shifting sands, each step forward sinking her deeper into a quagmire of uncertainty. The more she investigated, the more complex the case became. It wasn't just about a missing teenager, it was about a family, a community, and the darkness that could lurk beneath the surface of even the most ordinary lives. And she knew, with a growing sense of dread, that the truth was far more twisted than she could have ever imagined. As the investigation deepened, Detective Chen began to explore the periphery of the Miller family's lives, the people who moved in and out of their orbit. This led her to Rick, the Millers' gardener, a figure who seemed to exist on the edge of their world, tending to their manicured lawns and vibrant flower beds with a quiet, almost unsettling intensity. Rick was a man of few words, his presence marked by a stillness that bordered on the unnerving. He was in his late 40s with weathered skin, calloused hands, and eyes that seemed to hold a lifetime of secrets. He moved with a deliberate slowness, his gaze often fixed on the ground, as if he was more comfortable in the company of the earth than with people. Chen found him tending to the roses in the Miller's backyard, his movements precise and economical. He barely acknowledged her approach, his focus unwavering as he pruned a thorny stem. "Mr. Last Name," Chen began, her voice calm but firm. "I'm Detective Chen. I'd like to ask you a few questions about Andrew." Rick straightened up slowly, his eyes finally meeting Chen's. They were a startling shade of gray, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. "Andrew," he repeated, his voice a low rumble. "Yes, the boy." "How long have you been working for the Millers?" Chen asked. 5 years, Rick replied, his gaze drifting back to the roses. "Since they moved in." "Did you know Andrew well?" Rick hesitated, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "I saw him around. He kept to himself mostly, headphones always on." Chen pressed further. "Did you ever have any conversations with him?" Rick's jaw tightened. "Sometimes, small talk, about the garden. He liked the sunflowers." But Chen sensed a reluctance in his answers, a deliberate withholding. It was as if he was carefully choosing his words, revealing only what he wanted her to know. As Chen delved deeper into Rick's background, she uncovered a past shrouded in shadow. There were whispers of a troubled youth, of run-ins with the law, and a reputation for violence that he had seemingly left behind. "He had a temper," a neighbor told Chen, her voice hushed. "Used to get into fights, real bad ones." There were rumors of a family he had abandoned, a wife and child he had left without a trace. It was a past that painted a stark contrast to the quiet, unassuming figure who tended to the miller's garden. Chen's instinct screamed at her. Rick was more than just a gardener. He was a man with secrets, a man with a darkness lurking beneath the surface. And, as the evidence in Andrew's case grew more perplexing, Rick became an increasingly prominent figure in her mind. Was he a red herring, a distraction from the real truth? Or was he the key to unlocking the mystery of Andrew's disappearance? Chen couldn't be sure. But she knew one thing: she had to watch him closely. Because in the shadows of the miller's manicured garden, she sensed a danger as potent as the thorns on Rick's roses. Detective Chen found herself back in David Miller's study, the air thick with the unspoken tension that seemed to cling to the very walls of the house. She had requested another meeting, her mind buzzing with the contradictions and inconsistencies she had uncovered. David, though outwardly cooperative, maintained a carefully constructed facade of grief and concern, a performance that Chen found increasingly unconvincing. As she scanned the room, her gaze fell once again on the photograph on David's desk. The image of him and another young man, arms slung around each other, laughing with carefree abandon, had lingered in her mind. There was an intimacy in their pose, a shared history etched in their smiles. Chen picked up the photograph, her eyes narrowing. "You said this was an old friend from college, Mr. Miller." David stiffened, his eyes darting to the picture. "Yes, that's right." "His name?" Chen pressed. David hesitated, a flicker of unease crossing his face. Mark Thompson." Chen studied the other man in the photo. The resemblance, now that she looked closely, was unmistakable. The same sharp features, the same intense gaze, the same set to the jaw. "Mr. Miller," Chen said, her voice low and deliberate, "this isn't Mark Thompson, is it? This is Rick, your gardener." David's carefully constructed composure crumbled. His face flushed, and his eyes darted around the room as if searching for an escape route. I don't know what you're talking about." Chen held up the photograph. "Don't lie to me, Mr. Miller. This is him. Younger, yes, but it's him. You and Rick were close. Friends, very close." The silence in the room stretched, thick and heavy with unspoken truths. David's denial faltered, replaced by a weary resignation. "Okay, fine," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "It's Rick. His name is Richard, actually. Richard, Rick's last name." Chen's mind raced. This was a significant breakthrough. It shattered the image of Rick as a mere outsider, a peripheral figure in the Millers' lives. It placed him squarely in David's past, connected to him by a bond that spanned decades. "Why did you lie about it?" Chen asked, her gaze unwavering. David looked away, his face etched with a mixture of shame and regret. "It's complicated." "Complicated how?" Chen pressed. David hesitated, then sighed. Richard and I, we grew up together. We were best friends, like brothers." "But you haven't mentioned this before," Chen pointed out. "Why?" David's voice dropped. Our friendship ended badly. There was a falling out. I haven't seen or spoken to him in years, until he started working for us." "A falling out," Chen repeated, her mind already piecing together the implications. "What kind of falling out?" David's gaze hardened. "It's personal. It has nothing to do with Andrew." But Chen didn't believe him. She felt the weight of the past pressing down on them, the echoes of a broken friendship reverberating through the present. This wasn't just a coincidence. This was a connection, a link between two men who both had access to Andrew, two men who both had secrets. And Chen knew, with a growing sense of urgency, that the key to finding Andrew lay buried in the tangled history of David Miller and Rick's last name. Detective Chen's relentless probing had chipped away at the Miller family's carefully constructed facade, exposing the cracks in their relationships and the secrets they desperately tried to conceal. The photograph had been the catalyst, the key that unlocked a door to the past, leading to a truth far more shocking than Chen had anticipated. She had confronted David again, pushing him to reveal the full extent of his history with Rick. The resistance crumbled, replaced by a weary resignation, as the weight of the past became too heavy to bear. "He's my brother," David finally confessed, the words heavy with shame. "My half-brother." Chen's breath caught in her throat. Half-brother. The implications of that single word reverberated through the room, changing the entire landscape of the investigation. "Your father's son?" Chen asked, her voice carefully controlled. David nodded, his gaze fixed on the floor. "Yes, from an affair. My mother never knew. My father, he kept it hidden. Rick was raised by his mother apart from us." The pieces of the puzzle began to click into place. Rick's resentment, his quiet intensity, his unsettling presence. It all made sense now. He wasn't just a gardener. He was a forgotten son, an outcast, a living reminder of a betrayal. "And your family rejected him?" Chen pressed. David hesitated. It wasn't that simple. "But it was that cruel, wasn't it?" Chen countered. "He was kept at a distance, denied a place in your family, while you enjoyed all the privileges." David's face twisted with pain. "My father wanted to acknowledge him, but my mother, she would have left him. He chose to protect her, to protect us." "So Rick paid the price," Chen said, her voice laced with anger. "He was sacrificed for your family's comfort." The silence in the room was deafening. The air crackled with the unspoken emotions, the years of resentment and bitterness that had festered beneath the surface. "Did Andrew know?" Chen asked, her mind racing. "Did he know about Rick?" David shook his head. "No, we never told him. It was a secret we kept buried." But secrets have a way of resurfacing, Chen thought. They seep into the present, poisoning relationships and fueling revenge. A chilling realization washed over her. Rick's presence in their lives, his access to Andrew, his hidden past, it all pointed to a motive far more sinister than she had imagined. "Revenge," Chen murmured, the word hanging in the air like a dark prophecy. "Is that what this is about? Is that why Andrew is missing?" David's face crumpled. "No, Rick wouldn't. He wouldn't hurt Andrew." But Chen saw the doubt in his eyes, the fear that flickered beneath the surface. The truth was out now, the family secret exposed, and the consequences were terrifyingly real. And Chen knew, with a heavy heart, that the search for Andrew had become a desperate race against time, a battle against the shadows of the past that threatened to consume them all. Detective Harlan sat across from Chloe in the small sterile interview room at the police station. The fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow on her face, highlighting the shadows under her eyes. She clutched a stuffed animal, a worn teddy bear with a missing button eye, her only anchor in this unsettling environment. Harlan had requested to speak with Chloe alone, sensing her quiet perceptiveness might hold a key to unlocking the mystery. Her parents, still reeling from the discovery of the bicycle and the disturbing online message, had reluctantly agreed. "Chloe," Harlan began, his voice gentle, "you've been very brave. I know this is scary, but it's important that you tell me everything you can remember about Andrew." Chloe nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the teddy bear. "I want to help find Andrew," she whispered. "I know you do," Harlan said softly. "Your mom told me you sometimes saw Andrew and Rick talking. Can you tell me more about that? Chloe hesitated, her small fingers twisting in the bear's fur. They'd go to the back of the garden, near the shed, where the tall sunflowers are. Harlan's interest piqued. The sunflowers, Rick's domain. What did they talk about? Chloe shrugged. I don't know. I couldn't hear. They'd whisper, and Andrew would look, angry sometimes. Angry? Harlan leaned forward. Can you remember any specific times? Chloe thought for a moment, her brow furrowed in concentration. Once I saw them arguing. Andrew was yelling. He said, "You promised!" And Rick grabbed his arm. Harlan's grip tightened on his pen. A physical altercation? This was a significant escalation. Did you see where Rick grabbed him? Chloe pointed to her own forearm. Here, it looked like it hurt. Harlan made a note, his mind racing. The secret meetings, the hushed whispers, the argument, the physical contact. The evidence against Rick was mounting. Did your parents know about these talks? Harlan asked. Chloe shook her head. No, Andrew told me not to tell. He said they wouldn't understand. Why wouldn't they understand? Chloe hesitated again, her gaze darting around the room. I don't know, but I think it was about the money. Money? Harlan raised an eyebrow. Chloe nodded. I heard Andrew talking on the phone once. He was saying he needed money, a lot of money, and then he was talking to Rick about it. Harlan felt a jolt of adrenaline. Money. Could that be the motive? Was Andrew involved in something dangerous? Was Rick helping him or taking advantage of him? Chloe, Harlan said, his voice firm but reassuring. This is very important. Is there anything else you remember? Anything at all? Chloe squeezed her eyes shut, trying to recall every detail. One time, she whispered, I saw Rick give Andrew something. It was small and silver. He put it in his pocket. Something silver? Harlan pressed. What did it look like? Chloe opened her eyes, her expression troubled. I don't know, like a key or a knife. A key or a knife. Two very different possibilities, both equally disturbing. Harlan's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of information. The secret meetings, the arguments, the money, the silver object. It was a volatile mix, a recipe for disaster. As the interview drew to a close, Harlan thanked Chloe for her bravery. He knew that her innocent observations had opened a new door in the investigation, a door that led into the shadows of secrets and lies. And he was determined to follow that path no matter how dark it might become. Chloe's revelations had given the investigation a renewed sense of urgency. The possibility of a violent confrontation, the mention of money, and the mysterious silver object had painted a grim picture. Detective Chen, driven by a growing fear for Andrew's safety, organized an extensive search, focusing on locations connected to David and Rick's shared past. The search led them to the outskirts of town to a place locals called Old Mill. It was a desolate area, scarred by the remnants of a once thriving lumber mill that had long since fallen into decay. The skeletal remains of the main building loomed against the gray sky, its windows like empty eyes staring out at the encroaching forest. Rusting machinery lay scattered across the overgrown grounds, a testament to a forgotten industry. This was where David and Rick had spent their childhood summers, exploring the ruins, forging a bond amidst the decay. It was a place of shared memories, now tainted by the shadow of suspicion. The search team, a mix of uniformed officers and volunteers, fanned out across the site, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. Chen, accompanied by Sergeant Miller, navigated the treacherous terrain, her gaze scanning the crumbling structures and the dense undergrowth. "This place gives me the creeps," Miller muttered, his voice hushed. Feels like something bad happened here. Chen nodded, a sense of foreboding settling over her. The air was heavy with the weight of the past, the silence broken only by the rustling of the wind through the broken windows and the occasional caw of a crow. They discovered an old workshop, its walls covered in graffiti and its floor littered with debris. In the corner, half hidden beneath a pile of rotting wood, Chen found a faded photograph. It was another picture of David and Rick, younger, their faces full of youthful exuberance. But in this photo, Rick was holding something in his hand, a small silver object that glinted in the sunlight. Chen's heart pounded. It was the same object Chloe had described. A key? A knife? The connection was undeniable. As the search continued, they found other traces of the brothers' past. Initials carved into a wooden beam, a hidden alcove where they had stashed childhood treasures, a rusted swing set swaying gently in the breeze. Each discovery deepened the sense of unease, blurring the lines between nostalgia and menace. Deeper in the woods, near a ravine choked with tangled vines, a search dog began to bark frantically. The team rushed towards the sound, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. What they found there sent a chill down Chen's spine. A makeshift shelter hidden beneath a canopy of trees, lined with old blankets and littered with discarded food wrappers. And on the ground, a faint but unmistakable trace, a smear of blood. The implications were terrifying. Had Andrew been held here? Was he still alive? Or had this place become a crime scene, a silent witness to a horrific act? Chen's determination hardened. She would find Andrew. She would uncover the truth, no matter how dark or disturbing it might be. And she would bring justice to this desolate place where the echoes of the past whispered of betrayal and violence. The blood found at the makeshift shelter in Old Mill sent shockwaves through the investigation. The search intensified, every corner of the abandoned site scrutinized, every shadow probed. Detective Chen, her resolve hardened by a growing sense of urgency, pushed her team to their limits. Then, a breakthrough. A young officer, navigating the treacherous terrain near the ravine, spotted something out of place. A glint of metal, half hidden beneath a pile of debris. It was a locked metal box, old and rusted, almost swallowed by the earth. With cautious hands, they pried it open. Inside, they found Andrew. He was alive, but barely. Weak, dehydrated, and terrified, he lay curled in the cramped space, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and relief. A gag was tied tightly around his mouth, and his wrists were bound with rope. The paramedics rushed in, their movements swift and efficient. As they worked to stabilize Andrew, Chen stood back, her mind reeling with a mixture of relief and horror. He was alive, but the condition he was in spoke volumes. "Get him to the hospital, Stat," she ordered, her voice firm, "and secure this entire area. I want forensics to go over it with a fine-tooth comb." As Andrew was rushed away in an ambulance, Chen turned her attention to the box. It was clear he'd been held there for a significant amount of time. But why? And who would do this? The truth, when it came, was more twisted than she could have imagined. Back at the station, after hours of painstaking questioning, the pieces of the puzzle finally fell into place. It was Chloe's clue about the money that had led them down the right path. Andrew, it turned out, had stumbled upon Rick and David's secret. The secret of Rick's true identity and the circumstances surrounding his estrangement from the family. He'd found old letters, hidden away in the attic, that revealed the truth about Rick being David's half-brother cast aside by their mother. And Andrew, desperate for money to fund his escape from what he perceived as his suffocating life, had seen an opportunity. He'd decided to blackmail them. He'd threatened to expose their secret, to reveal Rick's existence to the world unless they paid him a substantial sum. He'd used the silver object, a small antique key he'd found among the letters, to taunt them, a symbol of the secrets he held. David, torn between protecting his family and his guilt over his past, had panicked. He'd confronted Andrew, begging him to reconsider, but Andrew, fueled by teenage defiance and a sense of entitlement, had refused to back down. Then Rick got involved, driven by years of resentment and a burning desire to protect the only family he had left, David. He'd taken matters into his own hands. He'd lured Andrew to Old Mill, the site of their shared history, intending to scare him, to make him see reason. But things had spiraled out of control. There had been a struggle. Andrew had fought back, and Rick, in a moment of blind rage, had overpowered him, locking him away in the metal box. He hadn't intended to kill him, Rick insisted. He just wanted to silence him, to buy time. But his actions had taken on a life of their own, leading them all down a path of darkness and despair. As the truth unfolded, the weight of it pressed down on Chen. It wasn't a simple case of a missing teenager. It was a tragedy born from years of buried secrets, festering resentments, and the destructive power of family ties. And as she looked at David and Rick, their faces etched with guilt and regret, she knew that the consequences of their actions would ripple through their lives, leaving scars that might never heal. The interrogation room was a stark, unforgiving space. The harsh fluorescent lights seemed to strip away any pretense, leaving Rick and David exposed in their raw vulnerability. Detective Chen sat across from them, her gaze unwavering, her voice steady but firm. The air crackled with tension, thick with the weight of accusations and the stench of betrayal. "So, let's go over it again," Chen said, her eyes sweeping between the two brothers. "Andrew found the letters. He learned the truth about Rick, and he tried to blackmail you." David nodded, his face etched with a mixture of guilt and exhaustion. "Yes. He threatened to tell everyone. To ruin my family." "And you couldn't let that happen," Chen stated, her voice flat. "I just wanted to protect them," David pleaded, his eyes pleading with Chen to understand. "My wife, Chloe, they don't know about Rick. They never did." Chen scoffed. "Protect them? By letting your own son be locked away in a metal box? By letting him suffer?" David flinched as if struck. "No, I never wanted that. I just wanted to talk to Andrew to make him see reason." Chen turned her attention to Rick, who sat silently, his gaze fixed on his hands. "And you, Rick? What was your role in all of this?" Rick finally looked up, his eyes filled with a simmering anger. "I just wanted to help my brother. He's all I have left." "Help him by kidnapping his son?" Chen countered, "by locking him away like an animal?" "I didn't mean to hurt him," Rick insisted, his voice rising. "I just wanted to scare him, to teach him a lesson." "A lesson?" Chen's voice dripped with sarcasm. "A lesson in what? How to die in a metal box?" Rick recoiled, his face twisting with a mixture of rage and remorse. "That's not what happened. It was an accident. He fought back. I lost control." "Lost control?" Chen leaned forward, her voice sharp. "Or finally gave in to the years of resentment, the bitterness that's been festering inside you since you were a child?" Rick's silence was an admission. The truth hung heavy in the air, a dark cloud that threatened to suffocate them all. "The key," Chen said, her gaze returning to David. "The silver key Chloe saw. What was it for?" David hesitated, then sighed. "It was for the box, the metal box. It was something our father used to keep important documents in." "And you kept it all these years?" Chen pressed. "Yes," David admitted. "A reminder, I guess, of the past." A reminder that became a weapon, Chen thought, a symbol of the secrets that had destroyed their family. "You both failed him," Chen said, her voice filled with disgust. "You both failed, Andrew. You let your own selfish desires, your own petty grievances consume you, and now an innocent boy has suffered because of it. The weight of her words settled heavily in the room. The truth was out, the motives exposed, and the consequences undeniable. As Chen watched the two brothers, she saw not just criminals but broken men, bound by blood and torn apart by secrets, and she knew that the reckoning had only just begun. The truth, once unleashed, was a destructive force, tearing through the Miller family like a storm. The idyllic facade of their lives shattered, revealing the raw, jagged edges of their broken relationships. The house, once a symbol of their unity, now stood as a monument to their shared guilt and pain. David and Catherine's marriage, already strained by unspoken tensions, crumbled under the weight of the revelation. The secret of Rick's existence, the lies and omissions, had eroded the trust between them. Catherine, her eyes filled with a mixture of grief and betrayal, struggled to reconcile the man she thought she knew with the one who had kept such a profound secret from her. "How could you?" she asked David, her voice trembling with emotion. "How could you keep something like that from me? From Chloe?" David, his shoulders slumped with defeat, could offer no adequate answer. The years of silence had built an insurmountable wall between them, a barrier that no amount of remorse could tear down. Chloe, caught in the crossfire of her parents' disintegration, retreated into herself. The innocence of her childhood was shattered by the violence and deceit that had engulfed her family. She clung to her stuffed animal, her once bright eyes now clouded with confusion and fear. Andrew's recovery was slow and arduous. The physical trauma of his ordeal was compounded by the psychological scars. He struggled with guilt and anger, grappling with the realization that his own actions had set in motion the chain of events that had led to his suffering. His relationship with his father was irrevocably damaged. The trust between them was broken, replaced by a profound sense of betrayal. Andrew couldn't reconcile the image of his father with the man who had allowed his uncle to harm him. Rick, consumed by remorse, faced the consequences of his actions. The weight of his guilt pressed down on him, crushing his spirit. He tried to reach out to David to mend the broken bond between them, but his attempts were met with silence and rejection. The community, once a source of comfort and support, now regarded the Miller family with a mixture of pity and suspicion. The whispers followed them, the stares lingered, a constant reminder of the darkness that had been unearthed in their midst. The path to healing was long and uncertain. Each member of the family was left to grapple with their own demons, to navigate the wreckage of their lives and search for a way forward. Forgiveness seemed like a distant dream. Trust, once broken, proved difficult to rebuild, and the scars of the past remained, a constant reminder of the fragility of family and the destructive power of secrets. Detective Chen stood at the edge of the old mill ravine, the wind whipping through the skeletal trees carrying the scent of damp earth and decay. The scene was stark and desolate, a mirror reflecting the darkness she had confronted in the Miller case. But tonight, a different emotion stirred within her, a flicker of something akin to peace. This case had resonated with Chen on a deeply personal level, stirring up echoes of her own past traumas. Years ago, she had lost her younger sister in a tragic accident, a loss that had left an indelible scar on her soul. The pain of that experience had driven her to become a detective, to seek justice for others, to prevent the kind of suffering she had endured. The Miller case, with its themes of family betrayal and the loss of innocence, had forced Chen to confront her own unresolved grief, the desperation of Catherine, the fractured relationship between David and Andrew, the lost potential of young Andrew. All of it had triggered memories she had long tried to suppress. But as she stood at the ravine, the pieces of the puzzle finally assembled. She felt a sense of closure she hadn't anticipated. She had brought the truth to light, exposed the darkness that had festered in the shadows. And in doing so, she had found a measure of healing for herself. The faces of the victims haunted her still. Andrew's fear, Catherine's anguish, even Rick's tormented regret. She knew that the scars of this case would linger, a reminder of the fragility of human connections and the capacity for both cruelty and redemption. As she turned to leave, Chen noticed a faint glimmer of light in the distance. The first rays of dawn were breaking through the trees, painting the sky with hues of gold and rose. It was a subtle but powerful reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope remains. Chen took a deep breath, the cold air filling her lungs with a sense of renewal. The road ahead would be long, and the memories of the Miller case would stay with her. But she knew that she had emerged from the darkness stronger, more resilient, and more committed than ever to her calling. She walked away from the ravine, her footsteps firm and purposeful. The rising sun illuminated her path, casting long shadows that stretched before her like the possibilities of a new day. The echoes of her own trauma had found an answer in the pursuit of justice, and in the heart of darkness, she had discovered her own light. Time, as it often does, moved forward, carrying the Miller family and the town of Cedar Creek in its relentless current. The events surrounding Andrew's disappearance left an undeniable mark, a stain on the tapestry of their lives, but also, perhaps, a catalyst for change. The Miller house, once filled with the echoes of secrets and lies, slowly began to find a new rhythm. David and Catherine, though forever changed, embarked on the arduous journey of rebuilding their relationship, piece by painful piece. The road was fraught with setbacks, moments of doubt and despair, but they clung to the fragile hope that they could forge a new future, one built on honesty and vulnerability. Chloe, older now, carried the weight of what she had witnessed with a quiet strength. She became a fierce advocate for truth and empathy, determined to break the cycle of silence that had nearly destroyed her family. Andrew, scarred but alive, struggled to reconcile with his past actions. He understood the pain he had inflicted, the fear he had caused. The path to redemption was long, but he walked it with a newfound humility, seeking to make amends and rebuild the trust he had shattered. Rick, facing the consequences of his choices, found a measure of solace in self-reflection. The years of resentment had hardened his heart, but the events at Old Mill had cracked that shell, exposing a deep well of regret. Whether he could ever truly find forgiveness remained uncertain, but he sought to atone for his actions, to find a way to make amends, however imperfect. Detective Chen carried the lessons of the Miller case with her, a reminder of the enduring power of the past and the importance of seeking truth, even in the darkest of corners. She understood that healing was not always linear, that scars often remained, but that even in the aftermath of tragedy, growth and change were possible. The story of the Miller family became a cautionary tale, whispered in hushed tones, a reminder of the destructive nature of secrets and the enduring consequences of our choices, but it also became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the capacity for forgiveness, and the enduring power of love to mend even the most broken bonds. In the end, the case of Andrew's disappearance was a stark reminder that the past is never truly buried. It lingers in the present, shaping our relationships, influencing our decisions, and casting long shadows over our lives. But it also offered a glimmer of hope, a testament to the transformative power of honesty and the enduring possibility of redemption.